What is up, you guys? This is JP, and today we're going to be talking about the next program variable, and that is going to be frequency. To start off, frequency isn't kind of like, when you think about it, you shouldn't think of it like the same category as the other program variables. Now, Eric Helms kind of puts frequency on the same level or level of importance as volume and intensity, because he makes a great point, and he's right, is that they're really kind of inseparable, or they're going to all be intertwined somehow. But one way I like thinking about frequency as kind of like a filer or an orderer. It's just a way that you can kind of distribute volume and exposure to a skill throughout your week or throughout whatever kind of time frame that you do for your programs. So I'm going to be talking about hypertrophy and strength in regards to frequency. So let's start with hypertrophy. Obviously, hypertrophy training, your goal is to maximize muscle mass or gain the most amount of muscle. So the main thing that's going to dictate how much gains you make is how much volume you're doing in a specific intensity rep range and your recovery to that volume. So that is the main point when you're thinking of frequency and hypertrophy, is distribution of volume over a certain time period, or for most people it's going to be a week time frame, is because that's what most people's programs or workouts are set up for. So for example, if let's just say you're an intermediate lifter and you're doing old bro splits and you're doing all your chest exercises on one day. There's a certain amount of possible volume, maximum recoverable volume that you can actually recover from. So even though you're doing 30, 40 sets on chest in one day and you think, okay, I did all this volume, I'm going to make this much gains. That's not the same thing as taking that 30 sets and splitting up that 30 sets in between 3 different times throughout the week. A simpler way to put this is 30 sets on chest on one day is not the same thing as 10 sets on one day, 10 sets on another day, and then 10 sets on another day. And this has been proven in the exercise science literature. So again, when you're thinking about this, the main reason why you get more gains when you intelligently split up this volume to a higher frequency is that you are getting better recovery. You're getting more of that kind of application to a stimulus to you, recover, application to a stimulus to you, recover, and repeating the cycle more frequently, and you're recovering better than if you're stacking all this volume on one day. So that's the main thing you need to think about in regards to frequency and hypertrophy, and that's how you're going to benefit the most. Now, the exercise science literature is pretty clear on this, that 2 times per week frequency, it's kind of like that threshold for it's somewhat the same in regards to like 2 times per week frequency and 3 times per week frequency. So in that same example, if you were to do 15 sets on one day and 15 sets on another day, if you prefer that split versus like 10, 10, and 10, those have been shown to be somewhat the same, especially if you as an individual have been shown to recover from that and you feel good overall. You feel good with doing 15 and 15. But it's been, again, pretty clear that 1 times per week frequency, especially for hypertrophy, is just generally been inferior to higher frequencies if your main goal is to gain muscle. And one other note on frequency that it's kind of blended to strength when I talk about next is that it's not just the volume. You still, and trust me, I talk about volume. Volume is very important, but you still want to focus on exercise technique, because if you are getting better at technique, even if you're a bodybuilder, if you're not a strength athlete, that is still going to, for example, if you're doing bicep curls and you're swinging the barbell or dumbbell, and you're having poor technique, you're taking that load off the biceps and you're kind of shifting that load to surrounding musculature, ligaments, and tendons. Whereas someone who's doing strict form on bicep curls, you're applying all that load onto the biceps. So again, when you have higher exposure or higher frequency to a specific lift, you're going to get better at doing that technique, which means that overall you're going to be making better gains in the long run. So it's not all about volume, it's also exposure to technique. And that's now going to give a good path into talking about strength. So if your main goal is strength, the main point of frequency here is still part of what I was talking about with hypertrophy, and that's management of volume. Strength is different, even though volume is going to be a very important component for a strength athlete or a powerlifter or someone focused on performance in that way. it's not as important as a bodybuilder, but there's still gonna be other stressors that you're doing with heavier loads. For example, a strength athlete or a powerlifter, we all know, are going to be training heavier than a bodybuilder, and heavier weights are going to be, they're gonna cause more stress on your ligaments, your tendons, and your joints. They're just gonna be harsher on you in that way. Not so much in regards to hypertrophy. And anyone who has trained heavy knows this. If you do a decent amount of heavy sets of deadlifts or squats, you're gonna get a lot more banged up in your joints, ligaments, and tendons than you will if you were to do lighter sets or more kind of volume work per se. So it bangs you up in that way. So management of frequency for those exercises that bang you up is important, again, due to recovery. But even more so for strength and frequency is exposure to that specific exercise. What I tell people is to think about specific exercise like shooting a bow and arrow. If you're shooting a bow and arrow and you're trying to get good at shooting a bow and arrow, you're not gonna wanna shoot a bow and arrow just 1 time per week. You're not getting enough exposure to get skilled or good at that exercise. If you think of strength as a skill, it's going to help kind of tie that into your head a lot better than if you're kind of thinking of it as this like brute force, I'm gonna lift heavy weight type of thing. Another example is shooting a free throw. If you shoot a free throw once per week versus doing it 2, 3, 4 times per week, and you're doing less free throws on those individual days because you're doing it more often, or you have a higher frequency, you're going to get better at the free throws than if you try stacking all the free throws on one day. It's the same thing with strength. If you practice squatting 3, 4 times a week with lower or more moderate volumes than doing 30 sets on squats or 20 sets on squats in one day, and I know that's an exaggeration, but it's still making my point, you are going to have higher exposure to the squat, which means if you're practicing technique right and you're managing volume, then it's going to help you get better at the squat. So again, frequency is best thought of to think of it as like a filer or a kind of way that you can organize your volume and exposure to specific exercises. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.